What is beneath your feet?
Alright guys, so House of Ashur Season 2 predictions. Caesar's dead. And Season 2 almost has to begin exactly where things leave off. Ashur standing over Caesar's body. The blood is in the pool. And I'm assuming that Halara and Chorus, or maybe just Chorus, but more than likely the both of them will help Ashur in disposing of the body and things like that. And they can probably just throw him over the cliff. And after that's done, after the body is gotten rid of, after the body is dispatched of, the blood, so that's explainable. It's a ludus. It could be blamed on exhibition sparring, training accidents, and just have the servants clean it out. But Caesar's still missing, so there's gonna be a search for him. There would have to be a search. Crassus may come to Capua himself, and that could be how we get new players in Capua. When Crassus arrives, he'll likely bring people with him, and that's how we'll get introduced to new characters, new actors, things like that. The actor playing Pompey is the same man that we saw at the end of War of the Damned. So I'm hoping that we do get our old Crassus back on screen, personally. And if Ashur is discovered, Rome, they will make a brutal example of him, and he will be crucified in the worst way possible. Then there's the Ledger, that book that Caesar flashed at Casucha, his wife, before Ashur entered in the finale. So we don't know for sure what's in it, but if it implicates Ashur and Gabinius's death, it can't fall into the wrong hands. It was among Caesar's belongings, so Ashur will likely come across it while erasing all traces of the legate. Well, that would be the ideal situation. And if that ledger doesn't name him, then Ashur may suddenly hold leverage over Pompey and Crassus. So with Caesar gone, there's a crack in the balance between Pompey and Crassus. And of course, a lot of fans, myself included, have been predicting that the war between the two of them is going to escalate very quickly, and that's gonna kind of be the center point of the rest of the franchise, basically the downfall of the first triumvirate. But with that crack forming between the two of those men, Ashur, being the snake that he is, he may try to wedge himself into that crack, making himself useful to both men or just one. Maybe whoever is the highest bidder. Crassus, of course, is the wealthiest man in Rome, so likely Ashur will fall back to Crassus, and maybe bygones could be bygones, who knows. But if Ashur does try to get in with Pompey may still harbor resentment over Gabinius, and he may suspect that he was drugged. So that's probably not ideal. I don't think Pompey's a dumb guy. I can assume that he knows a couple of cups of wine wouldn't do that to him. So he's likely asking questions, probably right now as I'm recording this video. He's asking questions like, what the fuck? So I don't think that Pompey can be trusted regardless. Therefore, Ashur would likely have to fall back on Crassus. So now, back in Capua, Servius is going to be tightening his grip. With Gabinius gone, Viridia and Casucha are exposed. So Servius is going to press harder, solidifying control and creating a suffocating environment, especially for Viridia, who was already emotionally strained. She saw Ashur embrace Halara after the Primus, and that moment mattered. They showed that for a reason. Now, in Season 2, Halara, I don't believe she's going to break under the pressure in the face of Ashur's actions. I think she's going to step forward. I think she's going to step up, actually, more than she's done so far, because she's proven herself to be fiercely loyal for Ashur, to Ashur. So I think that she's going to continue to prove her loyalty in ways that we never even imagined. She already joked about poisoning a Roman official, even playfully, so I don't think it will be too beyond her to go to extreme lengths for her man, for Ashur. So now this is where the love triangle with Ashur, Halara, and Viridia is going to get messy, in my opinion. So Ashur rescued Viridia from the Cilicians. Their connection grew through tragedy, and they've been kept apart for so long. It's just like that love that's just out of reach. That describes their relationship perfectly. When Ashur was forced to kill her father after Pompey wounded him, and then Servius comes in and he ends up developing an iron grip over Viridia's life and that of Casucha. If Servius somehow knows the truth about Gabinius' death and reveals it to Viridia, that could turn her against Ashur. But if he truly knew, why not expose it already? I feel like we would have had a hint that he knew if he did. So more than likely, Servius is just as in the dark about it as everyone else. A more likely outcome, however, Viridia and Casucha endure Servius for a time. Meanwhile, Ashur and Halara grow closer through the grim realities they face trying to survive the fallout of the collapse of the First Triumvirate. So that distance ends up wedging itself between Ashur and Viridia. While Viridia continues to suffer under her uncle's control, the man that she loves, Ashur, bonds with another woman. And that's where things kind of start to take a turn. Old friends and old flames make the worst enemies. If Viridia feels abandoned by Ashur, if she feels replaced by Ashur, that hurt can harden and it can turn into hate and it can be directed at Ashur. And I believe that she could potentially become one of his ultimate antagonists. But once Servius is dealt with, that pain, like I said, it may not disappear. It may turn towards Ashur. Perhaps the pressure of potentially losing everything. She sees Ashur, maybe Ashur's moving on and they're being kept apart. The pressure of that, of potentially losing what she desires, because she does love Ashur and she loves basically her freedom. She doesn't like to feel put down, and she's going to be feeling that in second season, I'm very sure. So with that pressure mounting, how is she going to react? So let's take it back to season 1. When Petros, you guys remember Petros, he was in a relationship with Barca, and Barca was killed, and Petros lost that protection. And when that pressure started to mount, Nea started applying that pressure to Petros and abusing him. Petros broke. I don't think Viridia is going to do that. I think that she's going to lash out, and I think that basically more people than Servius are going to get hurt in that result, in that fallout. So now inside the Ludus, things won't stay simple either. Achillea is now the champion of Capua, the undisputed champion. And with that title comes challenges. She's going to get challenged. I don't know how, don't know by whom, but there are going to be extraordinary challenges, I can only assume. I also don't know how true this is, but I've heard rumor that Stephen the Knight himself expressed interest in exploring a female-only Ludus with Achillea as the instructor, basically. Maybe this could be another way for Ashur to put some extra money in his pocket. Who knows? That could be very interesting. But I just heard that little piece of information on YouTube, guys. So I wanted to throw that in there just because I felt like it was relevant. Tarchon showed restraint in the finale, but if Rome begins circling, Ashur will need more than spectacle. So Tarchon's been basically pulling back, and he's been pushing his pride to the side, basically training Achillea and setting his aspirations for the title of champion to the side. Now, I heard from Stephen the Knight's own lips that initially they intended for Tarchon to actually be a bodyguard of Ashur's. But stars, they came to him like, there could be a little bit more story here. So that's when they ended up actually deciding to form a father-son relationship between Calidus and Tarchon. So that's how that came into play. With Calidus gone, and with Achilea champion, also with pressure mounting on Ashur, could Tarchon still find himself in that space, fitting into that area, kind of like Barca and Betiatus? Could Tarchon still find himself being made useful in more ways than one, basically? I would definitely hope so. I think that could be interesting to see him challenged in that way. That could be interesting because what else is he doing, So in season 2, does Tarchon drift back towards that original role? Does he become more than a gladiator? Or does Ashur rely on Chorus for that kind of work? Or does Chorus just, continue his doctorate duties? I'm sure everyone's going to have to get their hands dirty. I think everyone's going to have to get their hands dirty. Let's be honest, man. Because when things really started to amp up, and in Gods of the Arena, Betiatus was dealing with a couple of guys. What was their names? Was it Titus or Tullus? Or it was something with a T. He was dealing with some antagonists in Gods of the Arena. And it was literally like an all-out street war, man. Him, Barca, a couple of their gladiators. I think that we can find Ashur in some very similar situations, just like he was here in season 1, when he expected Proculus to show up in the arena, but he didn't. And Kasucha came through and she helped us out. I think that he's going to find himself in way more of those situations, and he's going to need men willing to get their hands dirty if they expect to survive this shit. And yeah, guys, those are basically my predictions for season 2. We covered, let me see, what did we cover? We covered Caesar and Ashur and Chorus and Halara hiding the body. We talked about the ledger. We talked about the relationship between Pompey and Crassus and how it's going to be fractured now. We discussed how I personally believe Halara is not going to break under the pressure. Some people have been talking how they think Halara is going to break and she's going to be one of the people to rat Ashur out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that this woman is fiercely loyal to Ashur, and I think it's going to stay that way. We discussed how Servius is now displaying less than savory behavior towards Viridia, and he's kind of getting an iron grip over her life, and he's going to become he's definitely going to be one of the main antagonists for next season, certainly. We saw how he was treating Ashur already in the season finale, making him go and sit with the crowd and also basically making him leave his home. Ashur's not going to be able to deal with that if he expects to make any sort of income through the arena. He's not going to be able to put up with that. So how's he going to be making his money if this man's in the way? Now, maybe he allows his men to fight here and there, but we saw in the season finale, in the Primus, he excluded his men. Well, he excluded his men from the lesser matches, but he allowed Achilea to fight in the Primus. So that man's going to be a real big problem in the next season. And I'm kind of a little bit afraid for how the hell's Ashur going to make reliable income with Servius in the way. So he's going to have to resort to some other methods, he's going to have to. But yeah, guys, those are basically my little, those are my little tidbits, my little 2 cents and stuff. But let me know what you guys think. Put your comments in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next one.